Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who watched Saltburn and said, can we make that a little more PG and a lot more 19th century? Each week we spin the wheel and land on a new genre. Spies, mysteries, horror, romance, SF, it's all on the shelf. And right now we are reading romance novels. This is the second one of this cycle, Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey. I'm Zach, and this week I am really interested in the protagonist, someone who is so dumb. Someone whose own mother describes her as a sad little shatterbrained creature. What a characterization.
I'm Bob. I'm interested in Austen using different novels, different styles, different all kinds of things related to books. She's very interested in different books in this book. And I think it's very cool. And it's more important than just referencing things. She's really trying to do something with genre here. What a beautiful love story. I'm glad we chose this in our romance wheel this time. And we could talk about other stuff that's peppered in throughout the story because it is complicated in a very fun way. I think every time we read Austen, I realize, wow, she really deserves all the accolades she gets. We're going to be reading another novel next week that's the same length, and we could talk about the differences in style and quality. But Austen has it all. You know, her books are funny, they're philosophical, you can't put them down. I really wanted to know what was going to happen throughout this story, and it's not like there are kind of some surprising twists, but none of them are in your face. Whereas the author we'll see next week is very much in your face, kind of manipulating the reader. This is taking the reader with the heroine, with the main character, with Catherine, and telling a great story, telling an important story, and giving you a really fun experience while you're reading. I just loved it. Did you like this book?
Yeah, absolutely. I do like this book. I think that part of what's so interesting about this book is how foreign it feels. How much of so not just the kind of social mores of the time in England, but also the England that it describes, and also the kind of interiority of our protagonist. I get that, like, obviously this was a time of different, like, career and educational prospects for women, but it's like really surprising to see like a kind of like a woman's interiority being written in such a way that seems so much less mature than her like stated age of 17.
That's a very interesting thing to point out. I want to talk more about her maturity soon. I think she's a very cool character, even though her mom kind of calls her stupid. I think she's very smart. She's innocent. She's sheltered because she's lived such a nice life with her 9 brothers and sisters in the woods. Not in the woods, but far away from the city. And so when she goes to Bath, it's her first time really going outside of what she's comfortable with. She doesn't know how these things work. And she even finds out, wow, we don't know anyone. We can go to this ball, but no one's going to invite us to dance. No one's going to invite us to sit down because no one has ever seen me before. They go with their friends, I can't even remember their name. Their neighbors. Their neighbors bring Catherine because now she's kind of in that coming out age of 17, 18. She's become a debutante, and they're going to bring her into society. And when she does that, it's totally new. One thing I want to point out, Zach, because I think you've brought up a really good point, it is a little bit foreign, and it can be maybe a put-off to readers who haven't read Austen before because it is not overwhelming, but it does make you think you have to know everything that's going on because a lot of it will be over certain readers, over my head anyway. But for context, this is 30 years after Castle of Otranto, which we've read before, but 90 years before Sherlock Holmes. So it really is quite a while ago, and society does feel quite different. What do you think, though, of Catherine? I guess you said that she's kind of a little ditzy. She's a little bit out of her league. Did you eventually start to like her? Do you like the decisions she makes?
Oh, no. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love her. I think that everything I'm saying isn't like a critique of the story or anything like that. I think that one of the best things about this is that the narrator is razor sharp, right? Yeah. The narrator has a bird's eye view of everything that the other people in these social settings know and are thinking and are doing. and also the interior view of what's going on, or like of what Catherine says and experiences. And really the heart of this story, I think, you gestured towards this just a minute ago, but it's like a fish out of water story, right? Mm-hmm. It's a story of a country bumpkin going to the big city and not quite being tuned in to all of the social dynamics going on around her. But what I like about that is that she could encounter these situations where she's like clearly at a bit of a disadvantage with something less than grace, if that makes sense. And I think that Isabella might be a good counter to her, because Isabella is only interested in like social climbing. She's a fake, she's a phony, and people see through her. But Catherine is very pure. Yeah. Part of what makes her so like sweet, so saccharine, is that she has read so many novels, and so much of her expectations and her comport in all of these situations is colored by all of these novels that she's written, and she speaks out loud her, this kind of aspect of her personality in a way that people, the other characters and us, the readers, find charming.
Oh, very charming. I think we got to come to eventually, does she read too much? Because I think that's a big question that the author, the narrator, the voice is asking us, is she having these flights of fancy because she reads too much and she's believing some of these fantasies? But I love the characterization of John Thorpe, which, what a great contrast when you have the Tilneys and then you have the Thorpes. But John Thorpe, when he's first trying to woo her, he's talking about how fast his horses are, how great he is as a hunter, how great he is all the time. And then he says, I never read. After she says, well, I really like to read. He says, the only thing I ever read was The Monk, which is extremely violent, strange book. We have to eventually read that for Gothic horror. But then he says, the only person I would ever read is Anne Radcliffe. And she asks him about Udolpho. And he says, no, I never heard of it. I don't care about books like that. I'd only ever read Anne Radcliffe. And she says, that is Anne Radcliffe. Oh, okay. So even when he tries to pretend that he's read a book, he's never even read the books that he pretends to have read. So I think it's interesting to have him, who clearly right away we know, okay, if she ends up with him, that is a tragedy. But when we meet Henry Tilney, and she says, I've been reading the mysteries of Udolpho, but of course you, as someone in the clergy, would not like that book because you would think it's too inappropriate. He says, no, I've spent many nights titillated by the mysteries of Udolpho. And we know, he has got to be the one she ends up with because of their connection with books.
Yeah. Yeah. John Thorpe was the character that made me realize that this could be adapted perfectly into a kind of high school film. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
John Thorpe is awesome. He is a muscle head. Like, he's just a meathead. He's the kind of guy who like would have like a muscle car, for his like first car, and have it be all souped up and be like, yeah, check out my ride. Because what he does is he brags about how cool his horses are. He loves talking about his horses, but he also doesn't really talk with people. And that's one of the things that you actually notice with most of the interactions between Catherine and other people. Not with Henry, of course. Well, maybe a little bit with Henry, but people talk at her. And most of what she says in response is basically her just showing her hand. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what this topic is. But people just continue to monologue at her again and again. Like, it is almost every conversation in this book is people monologuing at her. Fantastic. Fantastic. But John Thorpe is the chief culprit here.
The big monologuer. Yes, she can participate in the conversations when they are on novels, because that's why she likes Isabella Thorpe so much. Isabella has also read The Mysteries of Udolpho, and as Catherine makes progress in it, Isabella's like, I won't tell you what's behind the veil. I bet it's a skeleton. They gossip about what's going to happen in the novel. But she also, and maybe this is not really to her fault, but it's a big problem, causes a problem for her, mostly because of someone else's overreaction, I think, the way we would see it today. But she reads way too far into the death of Mrs. Tilney. As you said earlier, she suspects that General Tilney did it, but she really has no evidence. She has very little evidence, and she is imagining all of these things because she's at Northanger Abbey, and it reminds her of the castles in Mysteries of Udolpho, and she kind of goes into this fantasy to the point where I guess no evidence that she sees around her is going to let her contradict that until she suddenly comes up in front of it and it's too late. She's gone too far, and she is essentially, she hasn't accused him, but Henry Tilney asks her, like, do you suspect my father of murdering my mother? And she says, yeah. And that crosses a line for him. What do you think? I think it's such an interesting character. It's almost like Don Quixote. You read too many romance novels, and he's reading these romance novels about knights, and she's reading these horrids. And it's gotten her into a little bit of trouble with reality and fantasy. What did you think of that?
You know, another one that we haven't read this together, but Ottessa Moshfegh's Lapvona, where the character is he's slow. You know, the protagonist through which we see the world is slow, but we only partially get that from our read of his interiority. We mostly get that reflected from the other characters' interactions with him, where they say, "Oh, you're a dumb boy," basically. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to see, like, we get Catherine's interiority, right? We follow her step by step into this house of mystery, this abbey. But it's the outside world which is telling us that Catherine is dead wrong. Like an easy example, she spots the chest in the corner of the room. And, you know, she blows out her candle, and it's like a ghost blew out the candle. She, you know, hides under her bed sheets, and she's so scared. And then when she wakes up, she looks at the manuscript that she pulled from the chest, and it's just a laundry list. You know what I mean? Like, like her imagination carries her away. And this and other interactions with other characters, including the accusation of Henry's father killing his mother, quickly give us the feedback as readers that she is totally on one.
She's on one. What do you think then for the romance? Because I think she is a very interesting character to have in a romance. You know, we just read Lost and Lassoed. Those characters are immediately lovable. And I feel Catherine is too, and same with Henry Tilney. Although he is he's not a joker. I feel like he is satirizing their whole society while still completely respecting it. And it's hard to get a read on him at first, but you quickly, I think, a big part because of the novels and how much he invites her in a way that is showing her society without trying to dazzle her with his position in society, because he never reveals that. So he's pretty trustworthy. We like him in that way. But what do you think of their ongoing romance? And there's one moment I want to highlight where he kind of encourages this idea of Northanger Abbey being haunted, because when he says, "Oh, you can go with me, you will no doubt be taken up by the fantasy of Northanger Abbey in the dark shadows and pursue the dark closets and even go and find the underground passage." He's making stuff up to kind of build this little fantasy together. But then when he finds out, oh, she's really taken this a little too far, a little too seriously, he overreacts at first. But what do you think of that as kind of a mutual story building and then a mishap that causes a speed bump or a road bump or kind of conflict in their relationship? How does that, for you, influence the whole relationship? And what do you think about their love?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think first and foremost, he's a flirt, right? Like he, in comparison to the other potential partners that she meets throughout here, he's the one who lives in her world with her and is fun and playful and joking and willing to humor each other, really. Like he's the right emotional and cultural material for her. Every other guy in this book is basically just like a bluster and full of bluster and a braggart. You know what I mean? Like they feel more like one-dimensional caricatures of what you would expect a kind of lordly 19th century English man would be. that said, you asked, what do I think of their romance? Which I think is a totally other question, or a totally different question, or maybe something I'll give a totally different answer to, which is I would go so far as to say, what romance? Like they don't, this is so not steamy. Like maybe this is a good time for us to talk about it as a romance novel, because I do think it is, but also it's so proto-romance that it's almost unrecognizable. What do you think? How does it fit in with the tradition?
I think as far as we know the two who got to get together, it's pretty obvious from the beginning. And then we're just watching things that tear at our heartstrings until that block them. This is like a Shakespearean romance. Things block them. And eventually at the end, they do get together and they have to sacrifice a few things along the way. But I watched a really interesting video on YouTube by Ellie Dashwood. And she says that the word gratitude is really important in this book because it comes up at the end when the narrator, again, that strong narrative voice, is saying, this is the story I'm trying to tell you, where it's not exactly two people falling in love at once, but where gratitude is very important, where Henry Tilney just feels gratitude that Catherine likes him at all, and so returns her affections, because seeing that she likes him so much, it's then called what Ellie Dashwood calls reciprocal liking. And so it's a slow burn, even though Catherine really wants it to happen, but then according to her, it takes a while for Henry to fall in love or to be certain. But to me, it feels pretty quick, where Henry is certain, because when he's telling Catherine about what he thinks, the comparison of a dance and the comparison of marriage, he says, well, we've been engaged for the whole night, so I expect that we would not talk to anyone else or go dance with anyone else, and I feel like it's going to be the same with the marriage. So he right away says, I'm faithful. I'm not just a flirt, but I've found maybe the person I want to be with. But he doesn't come out and say it. He's just hinting at this. But did you feel invested in it, even though it's not steamy?
Totally. I did feel invested in it. But it wasn't the romance plot that was driving me forward. Like we just read Lila Sage's Lost and Lassoed. And I think in that book, I'm actually more invested in these two characters getting together, not just getting together because they get together quite early, but actually making it work, passing their relationship hurdles, to get to a place where it feels like they're, I don't know, on track to getting married, or, whatever place of stability and security you would call that in that book. But in this, the status of their eventual marriage and falling in love isn't really that big of a deal to me. Like when you think about what are the individual beats of this book that drive it forward, there's a whole arc in here where she has a plan to go walk with them, but then someone else makes another plan. And she says, oh, what will I do? How will I, navigate this difficult social situation of being double booked without offending these people? And like, what drives this book forward isn't love per se. It's the characters. It's strong characters throughout in here, and the way that these characters interact with each other in this world, which is so full of these rules, which seem almost incomprehensible to us in 2025.
Yes, that's true. It is really interesting to see the rules, not as much maybe the romance. I kind of mischaracterized. I think I drank too much coffee today. Ellie Dashwood's video was extremely good. I'm just not sure that it's only gratitude, or maybe that's what the narrator is kind of really looking at. But to me, it was very satisfying to see. I mean, Catherine deserves, love. She's such a wonderful character. She's great to everyone. She loves books. She loves life. She's really fun. And I think it's interesting also to see how heavy it gets when we meet General Tilney, because General Tilney has been just kind of a bear. He's really hard to live with. He's made it difficult for these two siblings, for Eleanor and for Henry. And their Captain Tilney, the other brother, just doesn't seem to care at all. He's kind of a... Frederick, he's a bit of a lowlife. But Henry and Eleanor have missed their mother for so long, and they've just been bullied by their father all this time. And Henry is not going to. He almost loses Eleanor again. Sorry, he almost loses Catherine again and again, and Catherine almost loses Henry again and again. So it does make me afraid of their romance not happening, and I can see why he needs her. But I guess I feel like Catherine would be okay if she missed out on Henry, whereas Henry needs Catherine. I don't think we often hear about that in this book, but I think that's how I was reading it.
That's an interesting read. That is a really interesting read, because Henry needs Catherine. Yeah, I think that the family does need something. I think that it's clear that the death of their mother has left some kind of emotional wound on them. But it's so hard because I don't feel like I have the clearest of understanding of who they are as people, if that makes sense. Like, Catherine, I think, needs him because he's the only one who lives in her world of books. But he seems to live in a much larger world than the world of books. Like, the world of books is one part of his world, but it's not his entire world. But she somehow fits into that world of his in a way that is tough to see. I think maybe part of it is that, like, part of us not really understanding who he is the fact that I think Catherine doesn't really understand who he is. He disappears for days at a time, and it's not really clear where he goes or what he's doing. It's kind of brushed off with a couple words of like, oh, he's busy attending to this, but we don't know what that means. We don't know what this guy's up to. But yeah, it's a healthy mystery. You know what I mean? There's nothing sinister about it. It's just creates intrigue.
It is intrigue. Yeah, he's just doing good things while he's off, or dealing with chores, I guess, doing his father's bidding.
Yeah.
Maybe, so you said that she fits into his world. I wonder if it's similar to other romances we've seen where someone brings the other out. You know, they're kind of the escape route of this stifling situation. I think that he finally gets to leave Northanger Abbey after being with his father for so long and probably just feeling like he's a huge, just evil statue lurking behind him. And finally he gets that freedom. And he, I guess, now has a reason to have courage to tell his father no and to say, I'm not going to keep living this way. And she becomes kind of a light walking through their murky, dark castle. Northanger Abbey is huge. Henry's sister Eleanor is lovely. They're the best of friends, but often Henry is gone, and then she's just alone in this huge castle, and she's in love, but her father won't let her marry that man because he doesn't have enough money until the very end of the book, and things work out. But she really desperately wants to have Catherine stay at Northanger Abbey with her because it's been like a decade of just silence. Yeah. So Catherine, I think, is very important for the Tilneys.
Well, I think that the situation you've described, as you describe it, actually makes me feel that this isn't so much a satire of the Gothic novel as it is actually reproducing many of the tropes of a Gothic novel in a much more tamed down fashion, if that makes sense. You know, the overbearing father, the dead mother, the children who are trapped in this ancient house. And yes, the house has been renovated. It's full of all new modern things, which, Catherine laments again and again and again. Oh, like this would be a beautiful fireplace if they hadn't installed this new version of a stove. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it actually does, even if it's kind of like a send-up of the Gothic, it actually does reproduce much of the emotional core when it comes to these characters. I think actually we could even say that Catherine herself is the only non-Gothic character in this story. It is a Gothic fiction reader falling into the world of Gothic fiction, where she is finally at home. It's like Jumanji, or maybe Jumanji is the wrong.
Northanger Abbey, the original Jumanji. I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. If it is, everyone's trapped in a Gothic novel, but Catherine's going to break them out of this Gothic novel. That's quite cool. We have they're not exactly twins, but they're kind of twins, Eleanor and Henry, and they're almost defenseless is what it feels like. They're like the classic twins of Turn of the Screw, or the classic siblings of Turn of the Screw, where you have a brother and sister. They're trapped at this haunted house. They're just trying to get by, but everything is terrible around them. And that is the father who Henry eventually says, and Eleanor tells Catherine, look, our father didn't kill our mother, but he just broke her heart day after day and kind of drove her to being completely unhealthy, so she couldn't sustain life anymore. So he is a bit like a monster. Then you have the idiot John Thorpe, who deserves something bad's going to happen to him because he can't do anything. And then you have the double. And I think the double is very interesting, where you have Frederick and Henry, because while Henry and Eleanor are much like their mother, they're very kind, they're very sweet, they love for love's sake, they don't love for money. That's very important. But then you have Frederick and his father, so Captain and General Tilney, who are monstrous, and they are, father like son. But Henry and Frederick could not be more different. They're complete opposites, and they feel a bit like the trope of the double, where you have Jekyll and Hyde, where one shows up. They're both Tilneys. If you say Mr. Tilney, you could be talking about either one. But one, wherever he goes, he leaves broken relationships and regrets behind him. And in the other one, Henry is just looking for the right person, trying to survive under the foot of his father. He refuses, I think anyway, he refuses to join the army and instead joins the clergy. So he is deliberately trying to be different from his father. What do you think? Did you like this double element?
Yeah, I think that's something that I hadn't really considered before, but I especially love how you contrast their different professions, the clergy versus the military, and the military being just a redoubling of what the father was doing. I do think that for Frederick to be interested in Isabella is a kind of like poetic justice. Like, we all get what we deserve. You know what I mean? And Isabella and Frederick are perfect for each other. And the fact that it doesn't work out is, it's not even a surprise. It's just, of course it doesn't work out. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think what was the last one we read by Jane Austen? Was it Sense and Sensibility, where she has these really great, as depicted in the title, characters who represent different aspects of different ways of having, I guess, a human soul, sense or sensibility, these characters who stand in. I think that in the same way with this book, you get these people who stand for ideas that are larger than themselves, ways of relating to other people in love and in life that are larger than just themselves. And she loves to put them in the toy house and let them play, to dial them into the Sims and let it play out.
I think there's another interesting trope, or I guess plot structure going on here that also makes you think of class difference, and then also like parents and children and the issues there. So while we have Sense and Sensibility playing out, while we have the sensible brother or the kind brother and the almost malicious, or at least completely careless brother, here we also have a weird misunderstanding of wealth, where John Thorpe, just runs his mouth and goes and tells General Tilney, look, she is extremely rich. She's probably richer than you, talking about Catherine. He tells this lie. He's just making stuff up because he's hoping that he can get with her. So he's going to, start enhancing his own status and enhance his sister's status in the meantime, because his sister might marry Catherine's brother. So he tells that to General Tilney, and that's why Tilney invites Catherine to their house, because he's thinking, oh, I can marry my son off to this very rich person. Also, he seems to like her, so great, I don't have to fight him. Then when he finds out, when he goes back, runs into John Thorpe again, for some reason John Thorpe wants to go and get revenge and say, look, I found out. He doesn't even say I lied. He says, I found out that all of that was false, and that she actually has no money at all, and she's just a social climber, which is, true of his sister, actually, not true of Catherine.
It's a great instance of projection, really. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
He's saying that she is everything that he himself is. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's true. He is saying that, yeah, he's trying to maybe take off that coat or take off whatever has been slapped onto him, the truth, and trying to put it on someone else. But it reminds me a bit of, and it's totally different, but it reminds me of You've Got Mail. Did you ever see that movie with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks? Oh, it's an absolute masterpiece. I highly recommend watching that. But they are chatting on America Online, and they don't know that they're enemies, because he runs this huge book corporation and she runs a little mom and pop store, but they're chatting with each other. And while they chat, they're like, oh God, that guy did it to me. You know, he's selling so many books. He's going to put us out of business. And Tom Hanks responds like, wow, he really sounds like a terrible, because they don't ever say specifics, but it reminds me of that fun. It's a little scary in Northanger Abbey. I won't really say it's fun, but it's someone has told something is not being revealed because of a illusion, and then that illusion, we get it right away, but that illusion persists. I guess it's just dramatic irony, but it's kind of extra fun in this romance setting. But normally it's between the couple. Here it's between the father and the courted woman, not two equals, but the father, and he's trying to bully his son's fiance, the woman that he wants to marry. And this makes me want to ask you again, because earlier you said, okay, we get thrust into this world. There's so many rules. Catherine is also thrust into this world. She has a good heart and she wants to do everything that is honest. But there are all of these people who can get away with dishonesty because they can cloak themselves in honesty. And she just doesn't understand why anyone would do that. To her, Isabella and Frederick are totally baffling, and she just can't fathom why they would do that. But there's a really great line where where they're asking, it's Henry that says this, yeah. There's a really great line where Henry is saying, look, we're in a society where there are spies all around us. He says, in a country where social and literary intercourse is on such a footing, where every man is surrounded by a neighborhood of voluntary spies, and where roads and newspapers lay everything open. So no matter what you do, everyone talks about it, and it's all society talks about. All they do is gossip. I thought this was such an interesting world to see, where it's like a small town cozy mystery or a small town romance, a little bit like Lost and Lassoed. But I guess there is so many things you can do wrong in this place, and you're going to be talked about for days just by doing one little thing wrong. Unless you're Frederick, Captain Tilney, you do one thing wrong, a few people talk about it, then you get away with it.
Well, he was saying that in the context of her accusing his father of murdering his mother, right? And he was saying basically like, you know, we're in a place where everyone talks, and not only that, but we're in a like country of great moral standing. We're in a Christian country, you know, yada, yada, yada. We could never get away with something like that. I think that what he says stands true with the ability for like his father to get away with murder, basically. I have heard some people say that they actually do think that the dad did kill the mom in some way. Wow. But reading the text, looking for evidence of that interpretation, I could not find any for the life of me. There. Yeah. Let's talk about that in just a second. But I do want to say that, like, I think what he says does stand true in the sense of not how Catherine views the Thorpes and, you know, just other people of that ilk, but just how the other characters talk about them. Everyone everyone is transparent to everyone else, if that makes sense. They're only not transparent to Catherine. But to get back to, you know, some of the like conspiracy theories or whatever you want to call them about like, oh, maybe the father did kill them, you know, whatever. As I kind of was reading around and listening around and watching around for this, one thing I noticed about this book, and I guess this stands true for other Austen novels as well, is that people love to take like the slightest turn of phrase in Jane Austen and spin out an entire essay worth of like speculation, or like, oh, this is Jane, like, oh, that line here is Jane Austen's like big, she slams British colonialism in this one line. And like when I go to actually like read and look for these things, I don't see any of that. You know what I mean? I don't know. I guess my beef is just I feel like people sometimes overread Jane Austen to have Jane Austen do whatever they want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like whatever their pet thing is, they want Jane Austen to be right there with them. I don't know.
I think people really do take any line and run with it, but I think she is trying to do something with changing. I don't know if she's really trying to change the romance style, but she's trying to change novels and what it means to show love and depict love in a novel, because she keeps bringing up Samuel Richardson, and she keeps bringing up these horrids, these Gothic horrors. She does say about Samuel Richardson, a celebrated writer has maintained that no young lady can be justified in falling in love before the gentleman's love is declared. It must be very improper that a young lady should dream of a gentleman before the gentleman is known to have dreamt of her. And yet she puts us with this heroine, with Catherine the whole time, who immediately falls in love with Tilney without knowing for sure. He hasn't declared anything to her. She can just tell that he's really a good guy, and she wants to be around him. Do you think that, we don't know enough about this time period and the romances going on, but do you feel there is a very distinct style of love and romance happening in this book? I wonder if she is really defining what we will think of as romance in novels in the future.
Well, I think that yes. Like she is redefining a lot of things, but I think that something that I personally question is the idea that like Jane Austen, or even I guess really any author, is like a mad scientist in a laboratory being like, I'm going to do this, and I want to change this, and my medium of doing so is writing this kind of story, and I'm going to I think that a lot of this stuff, I don't want to say it happens naturally, but it's also like, I think that people, like to echo one idea, people have books that they really like, and they try to write their version of it, and all the ways that they fail to write that book become the new style. People say, oh, this is awesome. This person is innovating. And, it is innovating. It's totally different. But it's also like the intention, like the point of inspiration isn't to revolutionize the aesthetics of the novel. The point of inspiration to me, it seems like, is coming from somewhere else. It just so happens to revolutionize the aesthetics of the novel, if that makes sense. But I don't know. I don't talk to enough authors. I don't talk to enough, all-time classic revolutionary authors to really get a sense. But this is my hunch from reading all these books. This is my hunch.
I think it's the opposite. I know that yours is probably correct, but I think authors do sit down and say, look, I'm going to, like when we read Castle of Otranto, Horace Walpole, I think is very deliberately saying, okay, I'm going to take these two styles, put them together, and create, I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be a weird novel about a sword falling from a sky and a helmet crushing a boy, but I'm going to do it. And then people glom onto it and start writing this whole series of Gothic fiction. I think that probably everyone does that when they write a book, though. Like, I'm going to revolutionize everything, and some stick and some don't. Like when we read Harlan Ellison last time, and he says, look, we like to say that science fiction predicts the future. It doesn't. It's just there's so many science fiction books that get published, and then we like the ones that happen to be right. But I think that she is deliberately trying to do something. She's mentioning so many books, and I love the moment when she says, because it's really important for Catherine to read, and she says, look, she's reading a novel. This is the narrator speaking to the reader at this point. She's reading a novel, and now I'm not going to be like those other people who just trash other writers, like Conan Doyle does. But I am not going to do that because it's our job as writers to stand up for other writers. She says, where is this? Quote, if the heroine of She says, if the heroine of one novel be not patronized by the heroine of another, from whom can she expect protection and regard? I cannot approve of it. And she's saying that she cannot approve of this slamming of other authors. So she's going to say, yes, she's enjoying a novel and she's doing the right thing. However, we see that she goes a little bit too far. But I think the idea here is this young woman who is probably being told not to read novels can navigate life successfully. Isabella is the opposite. She never learns her lesson, and she's reading these novels too, and she suggests her to read the Seven Horrids, but she falls apart. I don't know. She doesn't have a strong enough center, whereas Catherine, yes, she gets led astray by fantasy. She thinks she's in fantasy, but she sees, I don't know, she has a strong enough personality that she can handle. She can handle books, whereas some people go too far.
So I'm going to meet you in the middle on this, because I think it's not, I guess what I'm saying is, I think it's not that Jane Austen sat down in her laboratory and said, I am going to critique the Gothic, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make a commentary on all of this, and has that all in her head at first, and then sits down and writes the book. I think that, like, first and foremost, she wants to write a book. She wants to write a book that, like how you said, Otranto, I want to combine this and that. Perfect. But that's a concept. That's a seed of inspiration. I think that a lot of the stuff where it's like, oh, this character is in this hyper-specific situation, and she's commenting on this one thing about British culture or literary culture, yada, yada, yada. I think those are blossomings of the moment of the writer in the middle of the manuscript, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like, I guess all I'm saying is I don't think that a book like this comes out, rather enters the world fully baked, but is rather slowly baked. and I think that it probably does a slightly different thing when it's fully baked, when it's done, than maybe what she thought it would do when it was just merely the seed of inspiration. I think that's my whole contention. Yeah.
I like it. The casserole. What do you, so speaking of books, I really want to read these books that she references. We've talked about them a few times, the Seven Horrids. I thought this was a very weird and cool fun fact. She mentions, Isabella tells her, oh, you must read this, you must read The Monk. And then she mentions these 7 other books: The Castle of Wolfenbach, Claremont, Mysteries, Warnings, Necromancer of the Black Forest, Midnight Bell, Orphan on the Rhine, and another book called Horrid Mysteries. And so everyone thought that these books were all made up, that Austen just was making up titles. And then in the 1920s and 30s, 2 scholars named Sedlary and Summers found these books and found that they were real. And then I looked it up. Valancourt Publishing has published them over the last 20 years, and they look awesome.
Cool.
They look so cool.
Yeah.
So we got to read these.
Yeah, I would like to, maybe after this romance cycle, start in on Gothic. Have we read any Gothic, like under like a genre classification of Gothic fiction before? Have we done that?
Oh, Dracula, Frankenstein, Castle of Otranto, and Camilla.
Wow, we did that under Gothic or horror?
I think we just put it under horror, but those are all Gothic horror.
Oh, I gotcha. I would love to read some of the Anne Radcliffe novels first, and Udolpho. I know, but then, like, I want that foundation, and then I want to tackle these horrids in like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of.
I don't think we need. We've got the foundation. Otranto is the first one. I think we can pick and choose if we want. I've always wanted to read La Basse, and I think we should read these 7 Horrids. And maybe we could do some Anne Radcliffe. We'll get Barbie back on.
Yeah.
She's read Anne Radcliffe.
Oh, and The Monk.
I
want to read The Monk too. There's just, there's so many books. There's just so many books. It ain't easy out here.
Books. Byron loved The Monk, if it's any...
I've never really read Byron, but maybe one day we'll have our poetry offshoot podcast where we can become learned.
Drink from a monk's skull. Cut that. That's too offensive, but that's what he did.
Is that what he did? I'm not cutting that.
Oh, okay. Yes. One thing just to mention about Byron, I also watched the movie of this, and it's very, very, very good. I loved it. I don't think many people talk about it as far as Austen adaptations. It's slightly different because I think they condensed things, but they did a really effective job. One thing that was cool is I don't think they ever mentioned Byron in the book. I don't remember that. But he is mentioned in the movie where they say, Byron was just in Bath last week. And they get really excited about it. And Isabella says, do you know what he did? And then she just whispers into Catherine's ear. And, the viewer can't see at all what she says. And then she says, oh my goodness. And she says, that's not all. Even worse. And then the next reaction is even worse. And I just hope it's the pubic hair mustache. I hope that's what she's saying.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to take this point to make a rant that I've been wanting to make a long time, because as the audiobook presenter calls it, it's Bath. It's Bath. It's the town of Bath. But I have to put my foot down, because I have called it Bath before, and I've had British people, John and others, give me this look like, you idiot, like you uncultured swine. It's Bath, not Bath. But let's think about this for a second. I have to make this rant. Let's think about this. The town is named after the fact that the Romans came in, found some hot springs, and installed a public bath. It's named after its primary feature of the town, a bath. Now, the word pronunciation Bath is just the British accent version of Bath. No one gets mad at you for not calling it London. It's London. No one goes, you uncultured swine, it's London. This town is just Bath. I'm tired of pretending that it's not Bath. It's just Bath.
Get attacked by an irate person from Bath.
Yeah.
Oi,
Anyways.
oi, did you just say Bath?
The comments are going to be spicy on this video.
I cut my Australian accent there. That was
All right. Any final thoughts on Jane Austen, Northanger Abbey?
It's Northanger. Sorry. I think it's great. I loved it. Again, I think Austen's got to be one of my top five authors. Every time she writes, I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. It's thrilling, not in a corny way. It's just, wow, I really, really, really want to know these characters' opinions on the world, what's going to happen to them, everything. There's never a dull moment. I just really love her writing. So I was very happy to return to her writing.
Yeah, I have a similar relationship with Jane Austen as you have with Philip K. Dick. In the sense that every time I start a Jane Austen book, I'm just like, all right, okay, we're going to do another one of these. But then by the end of it, I'm just like, wow, this is this is as easy as just like watching The Simpsons or like watching TV. You know what I mean? It just flows. It's a very enjoyable read. So far we're 2 for 2. I have not been let down by Jane Austen. So yeah, let's maybe we should read one more of hers before we finish this romance cycle. We'll talk after the
we'll talk Danielle Steele. We can, okay.
Yeah, Danielle Steele next. All right, talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.